Postman Pat and the Bees. "What a lot of bees you have in your garden," said Pat to Mrs. Pottage.
"We just can't get rid of them," said Mrs. Pottage. "There seem to be more than ever this year."
"You might have a nest," said Pat.
"Oh, we might well," said Mrs. Pottage.
A bee came and sat on Pat's nose.
"If you just keep still, it won't sting you," said Mrs. Pottage.
But it tickled and made Pat want to sneeze. He closed his eyes tightly and held his breath, and kept very still. The bee tickled him with its feet. Then it flew away. "It's gone," said Pat. It buzzed around Jess. He batted at it with his paw. "Leave it alone, Jess," said Pat, "or you'll get a sting."
"Then we'd have to get the soda," said Mrs. Pottage. "Soda for a bee sting, vinegar for a wasp."
"I'll remember that," said Pat. "You have got a lot of bees in your garden. I'll bet there's a nest in that old tree." Pat went on his way. The summer was over, Peter Fogg was getting the last of the hay in, and the children had all gone back to school. A bee flew into the van and buzzed round Pat's face. He had to stop to get it out. "Drat that creature," said Pat. "It nearly made me go off the road." Pat could hear the children singing as he went past the school. They sang, "All Things Bright and Beautiful." "It's a good song," said Pat to Jess, "but I'm not so sure about bees." Pat had a lot of letters and cards to deliver. There was a flat packet of holiday photographs for the Reverend Timms. "Aren't these bees a nuisance, Reverend?" said Pat. "I think there's a nest in Mrs. Pottage's garden." "They're all God's creatures, Pat," said the Reverend. "We'd be badly off without them." "Well, I wish they wouldn't walk on my nose and buzz about in my van," said Pat. There was a parcel for Granny Dryden from her catalogue place in Manchester. "Do the bees bother you?" said Pat. "Not a bit of it," said Granny Dryden. "Have you ever been stung?" said Pat. "Lots of times," said Granny Dryden. "It's good for the rheumatics. It doesn't bother me. I can show you one place where I was stung when I was a little girl. It was on the end of—" "Not on the end of your nose," said Pat. "I can't see anything." "No, it was on the end of Blackpool Pier. See, there's the picture over the fireplace." "Oh, I see," said Pat, laughing. Pat went on his way. He had 6 letters, 2 magazines, and a postcard for Miss Hubbard. She had more bees than anyone. She had thousands. At the end of her garden were 4 beehives, and she was busy with them when Pat arrived. She had a net over her face, and a thing with smoke coming out of it.
"Leave the letters by the gate if you don't want any stings," she called.
You have to sign for one of them," said Pat. "It's recorded delivery."
"Bother," said Miss Hubbard. "Hang on, I'll give them a puff." She puffed smoke at the bees. "That'll make them sleepy for a while," she said.
Pat watched from a safe distance. "That's what Mrs. Pottage needs," said Pat. "I think she has a bee's nest in her old oak tree."
"Has she now?" said Miss Hubbard. "I wonder if that's where some of my bees have gone. I'll ride over and have a look this afternoon."
Miss Hubbard came to sign for her letter. Quite a lot of bees came with her.
"They'll not hurt you," said Miss Hubbard, "if you keep still."
"I wish they'd go somewhere else for a walk," said Pat. There were 6 on his hat, 3 on his neck, 2 on his nose, and 2 on his left eyebrow. It wasn't easy for Pat to keep still. He was glad to be on his way. At Greendale Farm, Miss Hubbard soon found her swarm of bees, in a hollow of the tree. Peter Fogg held the ladder while she climbed up to them. "Are you sure they won't sting?" said Peter.
Just hold that ladder steady, and you'll be fine, said Miss Hubbard. They know me.
She brought them down in an old shopping basket, popped them on her bike, and rode away. Pat was on his way home when he met Miss Hubbard coming along the road on her bike. She had something in the basket on her handlebars. It was something large and round, something like a big football. "Whatever has Miss Hubbard got there?" said Pat to Jess. He stopped to see.
"Thanks for telling me," said Miss Hubbard. "I've got them, as you see."
"Got what?" said Pat.
"My bees, of course," said Miss Hubbard.
Pat looked again at her basket. Bless me! He couldn't believe his eyes. What he thought was a big football was really a great ball of bees, humming softly in Miss Hubbard's basket. Pat wound his window up tightly, waved to Miss Hubbard, and drove home. The next day was cold and rainy, and all the bees stayed in their hives. When Pat called on Miss Hubbard, she had 2 jars of the best honey for him.
"You've earned it," she said.
"Have I?" said Pat. "How?"
"You told me where most of my bees had gone. I had an empty hive ready for them, and I was very pleased to get them back, I can tell you."
"Were they in Mrs. Pottage's tree?" said Pat.
"They were, and they were thinking of staying there," said Miss Hubbard. "All 20,000 of them."
"And you brought them back on your bike?" said Pat.
"Of course I did," said Miss Hubbard.
"Did you count them?" said Pat.
"No, I just guessed," said Miss Hubbard. "There might have been 1 or 2 extra."
"Didn't they sting you?" said Pat.
"Not one of them," said Miss Hubbard.
"Amazing," said Pat.
"Nothing to it," said Miss Hubbard.
"Thanks for the honey," said Pat. At tea-time, when Pat and Sarah and Julian had the honey on their toast, what they all said was, "Delicious!" It was the best honey they had ever tasted. Said Pat. "It might be worth risking a sting or 2 to get honey like this."
Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman Pat in his black and white hat. Early in the morning, just as